Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, and after the data slate updates, there is one important fact that I have learned and realized from all this. I have really absolutely no idea how this affects Space Marines. Space Marines, one of the most popular armies in the meta, in the game in general, the poster boy of Warhammer 40K. I really don't understand them because they've changed quite a bit. So I brought Lane in to talk about the Space Marines. Lane, how you doing today?
Good. How about you?
Well, I'm confused. The Marines are, there's a lot of red, a lot of green, a lot of expansions to the data slates, and I kind of really don't know what that means. And I feel like I'm not one of the only people out there. We have a lot of people that just play Necrons. Love you guys. A bunch of people that play solo Xenos armies that are not Space Marines. And what once was, back in 6th, 7th, 8th edition, some of the easiest comprehensive armies to play, now has developed so much further, can't get away from the letter I for 80% of the units, which also makes it difficult, but it has developed so large with such a collection, such a line, that if you don't play Marines, it kind of gets difficult to understand what does what.
Oh, I mean, as far as yeah, it's a very dense book. There's a lot of stuff in there. Fortunately for the balanced data slate, they didn't change that many, that many points values. We didn't get any rules changes at all for Space Marines, other than a few things for some of the individual chapters, like the Space Wolves detachment rule and the Blood Angels detachment rule got some small changes. I don't think it's going to affect whether people take the actual Space Wolves detachment. They're probably still going to take the I forget what it's called now. The Stormlance, the White Scars. They're still going to be White Scars Space Wolves, I think. But and then the Blood Angels just get +2 to their strength and +1 to their attack on the charge. So it's not a huge change. I don't think it's going to change anything for those detachments. But they did change some points, and it was kind of frustrating the way they did it. You said you were a little bit confused. I'm really confused as to why they did certain things. The fact is that Space Marines overall just don't have that great a win rate. It's only 46%. That's true that there are a couple specific detachments that use specific models that are very strong. So we've seen Black Templars, both Black Templars in their own detachment and Black Templars with the Gladius spearhead, but then also
Space Wolves, like you mentioned.
Yeah, but then also Black Templars and the Vanguard Ultramarines. Ultramarines running in a Vanguard detachment. That uses Centurions and picks them up, puts them down every turn. Uppy downy Centurions. So those two particular builds, the Vanguard Ultramarines and the Black Templars, a couple different versions of Black Templars, have been really strong. But for some reason, they decided to just nerf general Space Marine models and data sheets by doing points increases rather than just specifically addressing those detachments. That's the thing that I find frustrating is that, okay, Ultramarines in the Vanguard detachment are strong, and they're using Inceptors, and they use the Devastator Centurions. So maybe nerf the way they use those. Maybe, Uriel Ventress is the character in the Ultramarines army list that gives the Centurions deep strike. Maybe make him more expensive. Rather than punishing the Centurions and affecting every Space Marine player that's struggling to hit 46% win rate. That was the chief thing that I pulled away from if there were specific detachments that were particularly strong, nerf those, but they just decided to nerf all Space Marines, which is going to be, I think it's going to be a struggle for certain Marine players, especially when we consider like some of the things that make, for example, the Black Templars very strong. Their Sword Brethren are amazing. No points changes. Most people agree they punch way above their points value, and they didn't change it. They just changed the Crusaders, and specifically the Black Templars. So most people are just going to pivot from Crusaders to Black Templars, or from Crusaders to Sword Brethren. So, yeah, overall, Marines have kind of taken a nerf. They did lower the points on certain things. Specifically, they lowered the points on a bunch of just battle line units that don't really have significant damage output. Intercessors, heavy intercessors, assault intercessors.
I mean, I did like that. I got to say something. Looking at that and seeing a 10-man squad of heavy intercessor coming in at 200 points, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I mean, the thick, chunky boys, you know, they
Toughness 6, 3 wounds.
so they have some durability there. But when I'm building a list now, I'm usually looking for damage output, and they still just have bolters. They're slightly better bolters. I think they're strength 5 bolters instead of strength 4 because they're on heavy intercessors, but they're still just basic bolters. So I don't think I'll be taking standalone squads of them in my list. I know certain people will probably experiment with them in like the Imperial Fists, maybe because Space Marine bolters have heavy and have assault, and Imperial Fists benefit weapons that have the heavy keyword. So there may be some experimentation with people with that because it's a good deal for the amount of wounds you get at the toughness you get for 100 points. But again, when I'm building a list, I'm building for damage output, and it's just not really there.
That's fair, and that is a kind of a tactical play if you're building more into it. And Space Marines do kind of seem like they lack some of the all-out tactical forward push that some other armies have. Hypercrypt, like uppy down units, like you talked about before, units like that can play an all tactical army. Now, Space Marines do have a unit that I foresee us seeing a lot more of in the future, and that is a combination of units to be able to have a 12-inch bubble of deep strike denial.
Yeah, there wasn't really any change to the infiltrators. They're 100 points for 5-man squad. But obviously their 12-inch deep strike deny bubble is huge. Now that we're seeing a lot more Necrons with their uppy downy shenanigans. I don't think people were really taking them before, even though there are a bunch of armies that have the ability to not only deep strike, but to pick up and put down throughout the game. But with the lethality of the Necrons, the units that can drop into your backfield and do some damage, and we may be seeing more of the infiltrators, and there's the Phobos Librarian can also pair with them, so that they have the deep strike deny and also cannot be shot outside of 12 inches, which means it's really hard to get to them.
Yeah, I feel like that combination is one that we're going to start seeing more and more. Like you said, there has been a lot of deep strike and up down units in the game to start off. I mean, Grey Knights being an army that can do it entirely, but it hasn't been to the point of it completely crippling. And I think this is definitely, Hypercrypt is definitely going to be part of a meta shifter, and we're going to see that for a little bit until we start seeing other codexes come out that maybe have access to stop this easier and the meta shifts and everything goes on forward. But for right now, yeah, I do believe that a lot of armies are going to start looking at those type of units. I think infiltrators are definitely going to start to be on the table again. And that Phobos Livy combination is one that if you can afford it, is a very, very strong combination for a unit that can just most games at least, could just pick an objective marker because they infiltrate as well, still correct. They infiltrate out of your deployment zone, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, they're called infiltrators.
Right. One would hope. But that's kind of a big part of it is that they can get onto an objective marker and protect it for the majority of the game. And then as well, like you said, they can protect your backfield from some of these 3-inch deep strike abilities, such as the Monolith, to be able to really devastate and hurt units. So I think that, yes, we're going to start to see a lot more of those. I know AdMech has a couple of them, and some other armies have access to characters. I just was looking at one today in the Imperial Agents. There's actually an Imperial Agent. It's the Mystic for the Imperial Henchmen. So I know you were running those before. This might be something to think about. You take that 40-point squad, I think it is base, 40 points or 50.
Yeah,
how many points? What was it?
It's 40.
40 points. Okay, that's what I thought I saw. And then if you add 10 more points onto it, you can take a Mystic, which prevents units from being set up within 12 inches. That's 50 points to slap it into any Imperium army. That's another one that we might end up seeing here soon, too.
I think there has to be an Inquisitor attached to the unit in order to give it that deep strike deny.
There might be. That might be the case too. I was glancing through a couple of things. That might be the case too. But some of the Inquisitors are relatively cheap as well. So if you don't really want to it's an option into some of the Imperium factions. What I was looking at for Grey Knights is specifically to be able to protect my backfield from a monolith dropping in on me. Kind of don't want. It'd be pretty embarrassing to get out, up, down by Necrons when you started it. I don't want that to happen. So all in all, we did see some point increases. What's that?
If that does happen, we're not going to talk about it on the channel. We won't let anybody
Oh no,
that happen to you.
never happened. Erase it from the record books. But now you did talk about some of the point increases. I saw that aggressors did go up in points.
Yeah, aggressors went up 10 points for a 3-man, which is 20 points for a 6-man. Not terrible.
Does this affect your kill teams at all?
No, GW forgets about Death Watch most of the time whenever they make adjustments to things. So regardless of the point changes that have affected the units that go into kill teams, there's been no changes to the actual points of the kill teams.
So the so no, like you said, Games Workshop tends to forget about it. It appears that you are safe. Your Tome of Ectoclades went untouched through the data slate.
That was the biggest thing I was looking for, as I knew you never know. Even though Death Watch's win rate is so low, you never know. They might sneak in there and decide that we should be lower, or they always have their justification that if we nerf the things at the top, we have to also nerf everything to make sure that nothing rises up too high. I don't know. But yeah, the Tome of Ectoclades has survived another balanced data slate update, meaning it still allows you once per game to pick 2 units for your oath targets and reroll all hits and wounds into both of those for a whole battle round. So, yeah, it's still there. That means that my devastating wound Death Watch list, the Dev Watch, is still viable, and so I'll keep playing around with that, see if we can really get that thing to cook. But yeah, other than that, there's been no changes to Death Watch of the rules, no points changes for the Death Watch specific units. I was hoping for a drop on the Terminators because the Terminators are 25 points more than regular Space Marine Terminators. It's a steep price to pay for 2 extra heavy weapons. So haven't seen that. I think they just kind of forgot about us a lot. I don't. Maybe not enough people are playing them. So I think we have to teach them a lesson. Any Death Watch players out there, now's the time
to buy 9 assault cannons and 9 rocket launchers and figure it out later, right?
No, just the assault cannons right now. Don't worry about
just the assault cannons.
We'll get back to the Cyclones maybe if they change something else. But yeah, assault cannons all the way. Dev wounds. The more you look through the Space Marine Codex, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can kick out dev wounds. So
Stern Guard was suggested today.
Zach's interested in trying to Dev Watch list, and now that he's seen it played a couple times, so that's what we're going to try. We're going to teach GW that they need to pay attention to us. That's all.
It was asked earlier today, how do you feel about possibly putting Stern Guard in?
Yeah, the Stern Guard veterans are a possibility because they do. Each one of them gets a gun, a rifle, a bolt rifle that has devastating wounds. And then you can put 1 heavy bolter in there for every 5 guys. And their heavy bolter, for some reason, has devastating wounds too. So for 90 points, you get 11 devastating wound attacks, 3 of which are 2 damage, heavy bolter shots. So there's definitely a possibility there. And the list I'm playing with, it means I'm dropping Eradicators because Eradicators are 95 points and the Stern Guard vets are 90 points. I don't know if it's worth it.
Did Eradicators go up, or are they still the same points? Did Eradicators go up?
Eradicators stayed the same.
Okay. So all in all, like you said, so the Space Marines, it seems like they had a couple of changes, but it weren't too influential. Like you said initially, there is the armies that are successful for Marines are the ones that have these unique units that they bring from outside of it. Space Wolves being one with TCAV, Black Templars with the Crusader squads, and the Blade Guards, now what we're going to be seeing soon. And that seems to be the ones that are functioning much stronger, where the direct Imperium Space Marine armies are not doing as well. One that traditionally rises to the top is Iron Hands. Do you feel like they may have some play right now with the current book and current edition?
Well, there are a couple other point changes that made that are more significant, and one of the builds for the Iron Hands was based around having a castle with 3 whirlwinds. Each of the whirlwinds went up 35 points per model. I don't understand that. There were 145, now they're 180. I know GW is trying to reduce the impact of indirect fire on the game, but I don't feel like the whirlwinds deserved it. They are solid, they're strong, and they can be good, but I don't feel like they're overpowered. They're AP2, so if you're shooting indirect fire, they become only AP1 because you're going to get cover from them. And they're not heavy, so they don't get the bonus for sitting still. They don't get a bonus to their ballistic skill for sitting still. So I think the Iron Hand build that's based around having a castle of 3 whirlwinds in your backfield may have changed a little bit because that build went up basically 105 points, 35 points per whirlwind. The other big change is what another unit that a lot of Space Marines throw in is the Inceptors. Inceptors went up 20 points for 3, so 40 points for 6.
I did notice that. I mean, I don't mind Inceptors, I'll be honest with you, just because when Inceptors really were in their popularity, I was running Canoptic Court and I had Doomstalkers. And when we went to the tournament together, I literally ran into back-to-back Inceptors. And one thing that you know as well, when those Inceptors land near a Doomstalker, 1 command point, full reroll, Overwatch, goodbye Inceptors. Doomstalkers eat Inceptors. So good. So good. So I don't mind.
Yeah,
I didn't mind that.
I'm really happy for you, DJ. I'm really glad that you now when you do that, you kill 140 points or 130 points for 3 of them, or 260 points for 6.
That's value. That's value there, baby. Killing Marines is always
But
value.
it's one of those things where I feel like it's okay for Space Marines to have something that's good, that's strong, and they're basically taking one of the most powerful units and really putting a hurt on it. I think now you might just see one small 3-man Inceptor squad rather than running a bunch for damage output, just taking one just to get that 3-inch deep strike ability, which is still really strong. But rather than using from damage output, people might be looking other places. On our next game, to just bring a list of all the things that suffered point increases. I mean, if they suffered point increases, they must be good, right? So I've got 18 Inceptors. I might as well bring them all. See what happens. See how bad the point increase hurts me.
It feels like, yeah, like you said, it feels like the Space Marine book really lacks I wouldn't say identity as much as, and maybe I guess it would be an identity where you have the armies like Space Wolves. Even though Blood Angels is doing low right now, you have armies like Space Wolves, like Black Templars, that generally have an identity of how they fight, how they play, and what they're going to do. And then the detachment, the stratagems, and everything else support that play style. Space Marines are supposed to, I guess you would say theoretically, should play from the most middle tactical percentage. They should be vanilla. They should be a perfect, if you ever play those fighting games where they have the stats and it's like 1 to 10 and like strength and power and stuff, they should be 5s across the board on everything. Not the best at anything, not the worst at anything, and a happy medium. But it doesn't feel like they play that tactical game as well as they should. They have the characters, you have the enhancements, you can put everything on there. What is really missing to make the Space Marine a tactical army that could play missions over damage in those aspects? What's something maybe you feel could change to make generic basic Space Marines a more mission-based army?
It's hard to say because certain things that help us play the missions, apparently GW doesn't want us to have as much, because that's a key thing with the Inceptors. Their ability to deep strike outside of 3 inches just means they can score you secondaries and get behind enemy lines or deploy teleport homers. or assassinate because they can deep strike in and get a character. But Marines are in a tough spot because they're really limited by their data sheets. There's not really a good, strong, close combat unit. I mean, there's some things like Terminators or Blade Guard vets that are okay in combat. They do some combat, but they usually suffer from low AP or a low number of attacks, something along those lines. That doesn't really punch up. When I get hit by a bunch of Chaos Space Marine Chosen or Berserkers or something, it really hurts. But there's so many times when the damage output from Marines just isn't there in combat. They're shooting. They have certain units that can shoot very well, but they always have drawbacks to them. Certain things, like the Gladiator Lancer is pretty strong shooting model, but if it misses, if it fails, then it's exposed and gets wrecked and returned because it doesn't have much durability. So the weird combination of just being mediocre and fighting mediocre durability is not really there because there's so many other armies that have invulns or ways to make it so you can't target units, that sort of thing. It just doesn't. We need a couple things that are really good, and Inceptors are one of those things that are really good. And apparently, GW just wants us to take less of those or less of other things because they.
It's almost like they should separate the Plasma Inceptor data sheet and the Bolter Inceptor data sheet and make them two separate data sheets that are different point costs, but at that same time, still kind of leave it in a 0-3 column of you can take Inceptor A or Inceptor B. It's a different point cost. So now if you want that tactical aspect of the Inceptor, the ability to drop in within 3 inches, you could still do it. But now your weapon you're bringing to the backfield is the bolt pistol style thing, which is still very strong. I mean, that Bolter is still a very, very good weapon, but the Plasma tends to always be the issue with them. It's not the bolters. Like every time the bolters come up and we start seeing bolter inceptors, if anything, that their points drop down. It's like Games Workshop goes, oh, you want to use these guys? You're using bolters. Oh, we feel bad. Here, we'll give you the plasma back, and you get them for like one cycle, and then they're like, oh yeah, there's a reason we reduced them. They're too good. Okay, nerf them back into oblivion. And it feels like they constantly are getting nerfed in and out of the meta. So right now they're nerfed out of the meta. It almost feels like they should separate the data sheet so that it's Bolter Inceptors for tactical play, Plasma Inceptors for damage play. You get 0-3 of those, and that's it. 0-3 of this squadron.
Well, that makes sense, TJ. You should write GW a letter. Let them know that that's the way they should do things. Because I 100% agree. I mean, for many units, having free war gear makes sense, but for a lot of them, it doesn't. Case in point is my Death Watch squads. A Death Watch Proteus kill team can take so many different weapons, but then they just give us 1 point value. It makes it so hard to build those kill teams when the only thing you're thinking of is just maxing out the amount of weapons you can take because you have to get your point value out of the set fixed point value. So. It seems like they just can't. A simple solution is the Bolter Inceptor is 110, the Plasma Inceptor is 130 for 3, but they're not going to do that because they've decided that they all have to be the same points value. So, but I think Space Marines have that challenge because they have somewhat limited mobility. The only area they really have outstanding mobility in is some certain factions have the ability to pick up and put down, or certain factions have the ability to advance and shoot or advance and charge. But other than that, it seems like for this edition they cut back on movement for things, like the grav tanks, the repulsors, the impulsors, the lancers, the gladiators. For some reason, they only have a 10-inch move, which doesn't make sense for a flying tank. You'd think it'd be able to move pretty well.
It does not have. It does not have fly.
Well,
it does not. Like does it have fly?
Look at it. It's flying. It's floating.
Listen, all last edition, the monolith didn't have fly, so it was literally you're just like, through things. It didn't make sense. The models that literally are on floating bases that cannot fly.
if GW wants me to give them some some ideas now, they can fix it. They can reach out to me. Let them know. Give me a call here. But as it is, we just have to kind of make do with what we've got.
No, we do. It gets tough. It's tough. I'm glad to see, like, as much as we joke about it, there are a couple things from this that it's good to see. Number one, Games Workshop is staying to their timeline. We're not getting rapid fire FAQs that we did at one point in time, so the game is allowed to settle. Number two, they didn't hammer Necrons and AdMech. Granted, AdMech have not had a good win rate, and Necrons have been to the top tier. But I really feel like a lot of Necron's win rate is based on new book, new tide, new things that people aren't ready for, and the meta can shift and handle it in a different direction that other armies have not been able to shift, that they actually needed changes. And with that being said, I have three last questions for you. First, before we get to the one that I'm segueing into, number one, Dark Angels. Do you feel like they're going to come out and be do you feel like they're going to come out and be a heavy hitter, or are they going to be a wash?
I don't really know. Their codex doesn't seem to have a lot of positive reactions upon the internet. It seems like they're, at first blush, anyways, at the first look, they don't look super strong. I guess they got some point decreases in this balanced data slate, so that may help them. I don't know. I'm not really a Dark Angels expert. I haven't read through the new codex. It just seems like all their detachments that they have, their abilities they have, aren't really going to set the world on fire right now.
I feel like the Dark Angels are one of those that this is how people usually perceive Dark Angels, and then their books release or a point change happens, and suddenly these guys go from borderline mid tier to the entire meta is trying to figure out how to kill these guys. I mean, we've dealt with them in the past where it's impossible to move them off objectives with their circle of brotherhood, and then reduce the toughness, reduce the damage, feel no pains, and it's just Terminators sitting on objectives. And I think we're waiting for a Terminator armory. Dark Angels might be it. And we also haven't seen much from the Lion. His model hit. Not really a lot of nothing meta shaking with him. Like, he's a beat stick in his own right. Okay. There's a lot of beat sticks in this game. And I feel when that book hits that they're going to say, hey, guess what? Here they are. Here are Dark Angels. And I think they're going to be pretty rough. I think they are going to immediately jump to the top of the meta really fast. But that's just one man's opinion. So my second question for you is, just because I don't really notice this, did they change up the Custody unit maximum sizes and stuff? Or was that last month? Got it. I wasn't 100% sure I seen that, and I was like, I knew they changed it. I was wondering if they changed it again. But now we're going to jump back to the question that I segued away from, and talking about broken armies and needing to be adjusted. And while Necrons were not an army that needed to be adjusted, Eldar got slapped. How do you feel about the Eldar changes? Specifically, go in order of them. Start with Fate Dice. How do you feel about them?
I mean, in my opinion, Eldar should just not get Fate Dice. they're so strong as it is without them. They should start with 0, in my opinion. But I think they made a lot of changes. There are many ways in the Eldar Codex. It seems like GW doesn't even fully understand their own rules, because there are a lot of ways in the Codex to kind of work around some of these. So you can take a character, you can take Eldred, and it gives you 3 extra Fate Dice at the beginning of the game. So if people want, they can start with 9, and they can get 1 per turn if they have, I guess, Guardians on an objective. Now, that does mean that people have to
Guardian Defenders.
What's that?
Guardian Defenders, I believe. I think it's specifically Guardian Defender squads, which are the ones with guns.
Yeah, there's a specific unit they can take. People haven't really been taking them because they didn't need the extras, because they had a way of changing a Fate Dice every turn to a 6. So, but now if people want to take those things, those are point costs. So there's a tax for being able to take those. So I think there are ways that Eldar players will be able to find around some of their nerfs, but it's going to cost them a little bit. It costs them a few points here and there. I think Eldar are still going to be strong. I don't think they're going to be top of the heap anymore, but they're still.
I do agree. I think Eldar is going to be very strong. I like the Fate Dice nerf simply because of the fact that now instead of throwing 12 dice, you're throwing half that, which means some of those dice are not going to be perfect. Now, yes, the Farseer can kick one of them over to a 6. Okay. But now when you want that pocket 6, when you have that 6 or that 5 that's in your pocket, so that you can do double up with the Farseer and have the Farseer change one and then you already have one. Well, when you go ahead and do that, now you're down to 4 dice. Granted, Guardians, Eldred, there's things out there, but out of that initial pocket, you're already down to 4. And if those are not good dice, if those are low numbers, then you have to wait for the Farseer to start changing those. Otherwise, the situations when you can use them are going to differ. You know, you may look at a situation where you advance and go, okay, I need X amount of inches, so I guess I'll burn a 4 into this. And I think it's going to mean that a little more tactical restraint is going to be needed with some of the Fate dice. The Eldar player may need to sit, like you said, with the Guardians and other units, may have to actually build up a pool to be able to go into and hit a attack sequence so that they have the Fate dice do it. Where right now, it seems like the early game and the late game, before they go and make a big strike, both those sequences, they can use Fate dice willy-nilly and just guarantee extra pick damage onto something for an obscene amount. You know, I mean, overwatching with a D cannon and guaranteeing a hit is really, really rough.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna have to actually make some choices now instead of just, as you said.
I'm going to use the dice. I'm going to use the dice.
Yeah, because you might see less in Overwatch. You see less. Last time, at the team tournament we played, someone used them for a battle shock test. They may have fewer instances where they can use them. If they use their good ones on the damage output, they won't have them there to help them make saves. So overall, it's a positive change because I certainly don't think it's too hard on the Eldar. They have had all of 10th edition to be the top dogs. They need to be hit probably harder than what they were again, but it's definitely going to make Eldar players actually play. They're going to have to actually play Warhammer. They're going to actually have to play the game.
Eldar players are going to have to go out and buy a cube of dice because they actually have to start rolling dice.
Yeah, they're going to. I mean, they get to re-roll a hit roll and a wound roll for every single unit, so they still get that, which is still really good.
That is wrong. That is strong. That is still really strong too. Phantasm. Phantasm is now changed. Instead of it being a 7-inch move away, now it's a D6. A roll of 1, you're not going anywhere. A spot for a Fate dice. I don't know if a Fate dice can be used on this, on the timing of it, because I think that there's specific things.
The Fate dice specifically, the rule for them lists what they can be used for, and being.
So I don't think this is one of them. So they're rolling a dice. So you roll that 1, your unit's not going anywhere. You roll a 6, okay, you make it away with your warp spiders, but now that might be one that we see a lot less use behind. It might be one to use more in the backfield to get some extra movement out of something that's, like you said, these Guardian squads, maybe to get a Guardian squad over onto an objective. That might be a big part of it, but I think it's going to see a lot less play out of that, which is really a good thing. This guy was obnoxious.
I'm really looking forward to watching Eldar players struggle with the decision of whether or not they should do it. Because as it is, this is like, yeah, I Phantasm every single turn. No problem. It's 7 inches. I just move something away. Now they've got to roll a D6. Now they have to make a decision. They could spend a CP and they could only roll a 1. I'm going to love watching them struggle with that decision. And then when they do roll a 1, I will cackle and I will not feel bad about it.
But as you said, they got to make that decision prior to it because they knew it was a 7-inch move. They could move into a position to move 7 inches, one command point. It was very simple.
Turns out you have to roll dice in this game. Sorry, Eldar players. You're going to have to roll some dice. Sometimes they won't go your way.
And the last of the big changes, I believe, and if they're missing one that's also a big change, bring it up after. There are other changes, mind you. But of the big change, the Yin Karn. The Yin Karn got nerfed in a very fair way, I feel. The Yin Karn is still very strong. can still hit really hard, but at least it got brought back down into reason.
No, I still think it's unreasonable. But yeah, the fact now the Incarn can only be triggered, their movement shenanigans can only be triggered in the Eldar player's turn. So you, as an Eldar opponent, if you're playing against them, you can kill whatever you want, whenever you want, because it won't be able to trigger the Incarns. I forget what the special rules called, but their ability to move where something was that died. They can only trigger that in the Eldar player's turn now. So it's up a little bit, but obviously it's still really strong, especially because Eldar have some of the best indirect fire in the game. They can just launch, kill something in your backfield, and boom, there's an Incarn. But it's going to have to be there.
That can charge.
You're not going to be able to trigger it as their opponent. So that definitely frees up a little bit. I think there's a huge mental load when you're playing against Eldar, because every single thing you do, they can respond to in some way, and at least you have your shooting and fight phases. You don't have to worry about the Incarn popping up.
Right, because it does kind of slow you down, because when you're thinking of like, okay, if I eliminate this, then the Incarn's going to pop. And then you're really segmenting your phase, and it protects Eldar units in a way that really shouldn't probably happen in the game terms. Like a squad of Eldar jet bikes is flying by, and your Space Marines are standing there, don't shoot at them. The Incarn might pop up. Wait, we're going to see. They're going to shoot over here first to try and make it pop up over there. Just wait your turn. Wait your turn. It doesn't really feel like it'd be that fitting. And I feel like it really hurts the general flow of the game in a weird way. So I like the fact that it's back. That now the Incarn can still charge after this is done. So that means that's still a heck of a hit. Still a strong model. Still a very strong unit. I think that's still going to see play. Just it went up in points, didn't it?
I do not remember.
I think it went up in points a little bit. I think it went up in points a little bit. I might be wrong, but I think it'll still see some play. It has that capability. It's a good combo.
I think
piece.
The only Eldar point increases really were the Wraith Guard and the Night Spitter, the indirect fire tank.
That might be right. It might have only been those two. I can't fully remember when I looked at it, but no, that's about it. Now I know you're upset about this one. I was pretty pissed when I read it. Why have we gone this many data sheets and they still haven't changed the point cost on the Warlord Titan? 3,500 is too much. I can't run it in a tournament.
Yeah. I don't know how to react to that, DJ. I am beside myself with anger. There's no proper response. I don't know.
Exactly. You are speechless. I understand. Thank you for feeling for me. Thank you for the compassion. Well, Lane, this was fun. I'm glad to get kind of pick your brain on some of the stuff for the Marines. I play, as you know, Adeptus Sanctus, not the Space Marines. I play the Grey Knights, much more distinguished. Pinkies out. But the Grey Knights, we commission vehicles, but we don't get all this crude aggressors and sword brethren and that. No. We get baby carriers. And we're going to see some baby carriers here soon.
Yeah, I think their adjustments to Grey Knights were good because they really just increase, benefit your weapons on the Dread Knights. And I think that's it. Like we've talked about before, Grey Knights are extremely mobile, probably one of the most mobile armies in the game. They're very durable because everything has a 2-up armor save in the whole army. If you buff their damage output too much, it's going to be absolutely overwhelming. So I think just changing the gun, and then I think it was just they changed the weapon skill on a couple of the close combat weapons. I think that's enough.
Yeah, it was a good change. It's a good change. I think the sword, prior to this, the sword was just a little too weak. It had 10 attacks. The sword is one of the ones that has the sweep or strike profile. And the strike profile came in at strength 10, AP 2, D6 damage. Don't quote me on it. I think it was. But the sweep was strength 6, AP 1 for 1 damage. Now you get 10 attacks off of it. And in some scenarios that could be decent. But with the reduction of, with it being 2s to hit now, and the ability to reduce the devastating wounds melee strat down to 1 CP, there's a little bit of a home for that sword, I think, especially off of a Grandmaster who can utilize some of the enhancements to be able to fight better to get into those positions. So, and not to mention the Grandmaster also can go full hit, wound, and damage reroll versus monsters and vehicles. So having the sword that can hit on twos, even though you don't have that damage output of the strength of the hammer, you have a couple more attacks and you're hitting on twos. I think that now that gives it much more of a home. It was hitting on threes before. I know it doesn't seem that big of a deal, but you've played a lot of Marines. You feel the difference between something that's hitting on twos and hitting on threes. Like you really feel that significant difference.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because the swing, it's not so much what the average dice is. You can just have a bad dice roll when you're hitting on threes, and get far fewer hits than you were expecting. So, and the reroll thing is only once per game, right? The full rerolls.
Once per battle round.
Oh, okay, okay.
But it's only specifically vehicles and monsters. You can only get that full reroll against. So, and it's one model with this ability. So two Grandmasters, you're only going to be able to target one. But that heavy side cannon, man. That's a beautiful gun. That is a mean, beautiful gun. That might be a little too far. AP2 and ignore cover for 3 damage.
It's strength 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's wounding. It's still not great into vehicles because your kind of mid-range vehicles around toughness 10 or it's going to need fours. You're going to need fives and stuff that's T12 or higher. So I think it does have a limited scope that it can be used into. But it definitely for your elite infantry and infantry, it's going to be great to be able to be at AP2 ignoring cover because everything gets cover in 10th edition. But yeah, it's definitely going to, like I said, it's just enough of a damage increase that I think it's going to be relevant. It's going to help Grey Knights out. Any more than that, if they buff other weapons in the army and try and buff things too much, I think Grey Knights would just be overpowered. And at that point, I don't think you'd even want to play them, right?
No, I don't. I like a challenge. It's kind of one of the reasons I've pulled a little bit away from Hypercrypt, is I want a bit more of a challenge with my list. Leaning more towards Canoptic Court, since Canoptic Court we lost the Dev Wound. I feel like it's a more challenging army to play. That to say, Hypercrypt is actually a very, very challenging army to play. Like you've seen when I play, there's a lot of working mechanics with it. So don't take me wrong. That's not an easy army to play. But I don't like to jump with the armies that are the most popular. I like to kind of finesse with it. And you're right. If it just becomes like, oh, look, I play Grey Knights, then I believe the joke when Votann was first released that they made instead of if you pre-order the Votann army, they'll just send you a first place trophy for a GT.
Yep.
You must have missed that pre-order cutoff, didn't you?
Yeah, didn't get one. Didn't get one. Won a few RTTs with the Votann, but no GTs.
All right. Well, Lane, is there any closing thoughts you have, since mostly this was focused on the Marines? Is there any closing thoughts you have of the Marines moving forward in this current edition?
No, I think it's just going to be a challenge. I think, it took people a couple months to kind of figure out some of the key combinations with Marines. So I think even though they've nerfed some of our best units with points increases, I think if people really take the time and let it cook and start throwing ideas around, you're going to come up with some pretty powerful combinations. Maybe they don't use the things that got nerfed. My devastating wounds death watch list, there were no changes to points in anything I had in that list. So there's definitely things out there. Just keep poking around at detachments, poking around special rules, stratagems, and you'll probably find some things that you didn't think of before.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And especially with some of the shifts in the meta, some units might end up coming off the shelf that we weren't looking at before. I know that right now, immediately as we discussed it, there's many units that I'm considering and taking off the shelf right now to try different combinations. I mean, for such subtle changes, it has caused a massive ripple in what we will see in the competitive landscape, I think, especially very, very short time frame within the next couple of weeks. When we start seeing some tournament data, I think we will see a lot of very, very, very interesting lists and concept, and it's going to be a wild time until getting out of February into March, probably. I agree 100%. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. Lane, thank you for stopping in and making sure that we understand what's really going on with the Space Marines. One of the most, you go to a tournament, there's more Marine armies than anything else there. So definitely appreciate that. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all you guys out there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and get notified on all the content we bring you here on the channel. And I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.